My wife abandoned me with 2 kids for a millionaire. Years later, she comes back begging. But I rebuilt my life, and the restraining order I got left. Everyone's speechless. I'm 38 years old. I work in project management for a tech company, and I need to tell this story because what happened 6 years ago basically destroyed the life I knew. But also, and this sounds weird to say, it gave me the chance to build something better. I guess I should start from the beginning. When Rebecca and I got married, we were like 24 years old, young and stupid in the good way. You know, in love and convinced we could conquer the world together. We had Nathan a year later, and then Olivia came 4 years after that. For a long time, things were normal. I mean, we had the typical problems of any couple with young kids. Money was tight, sleepless nights, arguments about whose turn it was to change diapers, but nothing that made me think everything was going to explode the way it did. Things started to change when Rebecca became friends with a group of women from the gym she had started going to. Don't get me wrong. At first I thought it was great that she had friends and was getting out of the house routine a bit, because raising 2 kids can be exhausting and she deserved to have her space. But these women, let's just say they had a completely different lifestyle from ours. They lived in huge houses, drove luxury cars, went on trips to Europe like it was nothing, and Rebecca started obsessing over that. At first it was innocent comments like, "Oh, I saw some gorgeous shoes, but they cost like $500. Or wouldn't it be nice to have a house like that?" I'd tell her, "Well, honey, someday, but for now we're fine. We have a roof over our heads and the kids are happy." I thought it was just a phase, that it would pass, but it didn't pass. Rebecca started buying things we definitely couldn't afford. Packages arrived at the house almost every day, designer purses, expensive clothes, makeup that cost more than our weekly grocery budget. I tried to talk to her, showed her the maxed out credit cards, explained that my salary simply couldn't sustain that lifestyle. But she'd tell me I was worrying too much, that she knew what she was doing. The truth is, I didn't know how to handle the situation without sounding like a controlling husband, because I also understood that she had left her career to stay home with the kids, and maybe she felt frustrated or something. So I kept working more hours, accepted an extra job on weekends, basically killed myself working to keep our finances afloat while she kept spending. The arguments became more frequent. Rebecca said I didn't understand her, that her friends had husbands who actually supported them, that she deserved something better than a mediocre life. Those words hurt. I'm not gonna lie, because I was literally giving everything I had to give my family a good life. Nathan was like 12 years old at that point, and Olivia 8, and they started noticing that Mom and Dad were fighting a lot. I tried to keep things normal when I was with them, took them to the park, helped with homework, we played video games together, but the tension in the house was palpable. Rebecca started going out more with her friends, coming home late, sometimes not even coming home to sleep, and saying she'd stayed at one of their houses because they'd been drinking wine and she didn't want to drive. I believed her, or rather, I wanted to believe her because the alternative was too painful to consider. And then one day I came home from work. It was a normal Tuesday, like 6 inches the evening, and the house was empty. Well, not exactly empty. Nathan and Olivia were in the living room watching TV, but Rebecca wasn't there. The weird thing is she'd left her car, her keys were on the entry table, and there was a note. A note. Can you believe it? After 14 years together, after 2 kids, after everything, she left me a note. I read it like 5 times because my brain just wasn't processing the words. It said something like, "Michael, I know I'm going to be hard to understand, but I need to do this for me. I've met someone who can give me the life I've always wanted, the life I deserve. The kids are better off with you for now. You've always been the more present parent anyway. I'll come back in a few years when things are more settled and we can rethink our situation. Don't try to contact me. I need this time for myself. Rebecca." I stood there in the kitchen with that note in my hand for I don't know how long. Nathan came in and asked me what was wrong. Why Mom hadn't come back from her trip, like she'd told them. I didn't know what to tell him. I literally didn't know how to explain to my 2-year-old son that his mother had abandoned us for a guy with more money. I told him that Mom had to go away for a while, that I didn't know when she was coming back, and he looked at me with those eyes. That look that breaks your heart because you see that even though he's young, he understands perfectly that something is very wrong. Olivia was younger then, only 8 years old. And when I told her mom had left but that we were okay, she cried and asked me if it was her fault. I had to hug her and assure her it wasn't, that none of this was her or Nathan's fault, while inside I was completely destroyed. The first few months were, without exaggeration, the hardest of my life. I had to learn to do everything alone. Cook decent meals that weren't just pasta with jarred sauce, do laundry without ruining anything, do Olivia's hair for school, that was particularly disastrous at first, help with both their homework, work my 2 jobs, and basically never sleep. My parents lived in another state, and although they offered to help, they couldn't move in with us. Some neighbors and parents of the kids' friends were incredibly kind and helped me out when they could, but most of the time it was just me trying to keep everything running. The bills started coming. Piles of debt that Rebecca had accumulated and I didn't even know existed. Credit cards she'd opened in secret, loans, department store bills. I was buried in debt up to my neck. Like 3 months went by without hearing anything from Rebecca. Not a call, not a message, nothing. I tried to contact her at first. Obviously, because I needed answers. I needed to know how we were going to handle this legally and financially, but her phone was disconnected and none of her friends would give me information. One of them, the only one who was halfway decent, told me quietly when I ran into her at the supermarket that Rebecca had left with a guy she'd met at the gym, a divorced businessman with a lot of money who lived in a city like 4 hours away, and that was all I could find out. I hired a lawyer, well, the cheapest lawyer I could find, and started divorce proceedings. Rebecca never responded to any of the papers, so eventually everything was processed without her participation. The house felt too big, too full of memories of what our family had been. Plus, I needed to get out of debt, and I just couldn't keep paying the mortgage, utilities, and everything else with my financial situation. So I made the decision to sell. It was heartbreaking, I'm not gonna lie, because that had been the house where my memories with Nathan and Olivia were born. But I also knew we needed a fresh start. We sold the house, I paid off all the debts I could with the money that was left over, and we moved to a smaller town like 2 hours from where we'd lived. I got a better job there, just one that paid decently, and we rented a smaller but cozy house in a quiet neighborhood. Nathan and Olivia weren't happy about the change at first. They had to switch schools, leave their friends. But over time, they adapted. Kids are more resilient than we think. Life started finding a rhythm. It wasn't perfect. There were days when I felt completely overwhelmed and didn't know if I was doing things right. But we were together, and we were surviving. Nathan became more mature, helped a lot with Olivia, took care of her when I had to work late. Olivia was quieter than she'd been before. She'd lost that spark she had, but little by little she started smiling more. I continued with my routine of work, home, kids, work, home, kids, without much time for myself. And then, like a year and a half after Rebecca left, I met Victoria. It was at a bookstore, one of those independent ones that still exist in small towns. I'd gone to look for a book for Nathan, something about astronomy because he was obsessed with space, and Victoria was the owner of the store. We started talking about books. She recommended some titles. I made a bad joke about science fiction. She laughed, which was surprising because the joke was really bad, and we ended up talking for like half an hour. It was easy to talk to her, no pressure, no drama, just a normal conversation between 2 adults about normal things. She gave me her number in case I needed more book recommendations, and I, who hadn't even thought about dating anyone since the Rebecca thing, found myself sending her a message a few days later. Victoria was completely different from Rebecca. Calm, grounded, genuinely interested in getting to know me and my kids. She didn't care that I was a single dad, with 2 children, and a complicated schedule. We started dating casually, coffees, walks, some dinners when I could get a babysitter. I introduced her to Nathan and Olivia after like 6 months because I didn't want to rush anything and confuse them, and to my relief, they got along with her from the start. Victoria never tried to be their mother. That was what I appreciated most. She was just Victoria, someone who was kind to them, who was interested in their lives, but who respected the space they had with me. 2 years after meeting her, I proposed. It was simple, no grand gestures, just me and her in the same bookstore where we met, and she said yes. We got married in a small, courthouse ceremony, with Nathan and Olivia as witnesses, my parents, who came from their state, and some close friends. We didn't need anything elaborate. We just wanted to be together officially and build our life as a family. And that's what we did. Victoria moved in with us. The house felt more alive, warmer. She and I worked as a team with the kids, shared responsibilities, supported each other when things got tough. Nathan was like 18 then, and Olivia 14. And although there were still moments where Rebecca's absence was felt, especially on important dates, we were okay. We were more than okay. We were happy. And then, 6 years after abandoning us, 6 years of absolute silence, Rebecca called. It was a Saturday morning. I was making breakfast with Victoria. The kids were still sleeping because it was the weekend, and my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered thinking it was something from work or maybe a spam call, and I heard her voice. "Michael, it's me, Rebecca," she said like nothing, like she hadn't disappeared for half a decade. I went to visit the house, and there are strangers living there. "What's going on? Why didn't you tell me you'd moved? Where are my children?" I was frozen. I literally couldn't process that I was having this conversation. Victoria looked at me with concern and mouthed, "Who is it?" And I told her Rebecca quietly, and I saw how her expression changed completely. I told Rebecca that we'd gotten divorced, that I'd sold the house years ago, that we'd moved, that I'd remarried. There was silence on the other end of the line, and then, and I'm not exaggerating, she yelled at me. She yelled at me about how dare I divorce her without her consent, apparently completely ignoring that she never responded to the legal papers. How could I have married someone else when she'd clearly told me she was coming back? That I had broken our family. That I was a traitor and a liar. I was standing there with the phone to my ear, listening to her accuse me of ruining our marriage, accuse me basically of cheating on her, and the irony was so absurd I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I told her with the calmest voice I could muster, "Rebecca, you left us 6 years ago. You chose to leave. I moved on with my life, because I had no other choice." She demanded my address, demanded to speak with Nathan and Olivia, demanded that we fix this like adults. I told her no, that the kids weren't kids anymore, that they were 18 and 14 and could decide for themselves if they wanted to see her, but that she wasn't going to show up in our lives and expect everything to be as she left it. I hung up the phone and realized my hands were shaking. Victoria hugged me and told me everything was going to be okay, that I didn't have to let Rebecca affect us. But I knew this wasn't going to end there. I knew Rebecca, and when something didn't go the way she wanted, she didn't give up easily. Nathan came down for breakfast like half an hour later, and I told him his mother had called. His reaction was immediate and clear. He said he didn't want to know anything about her, that she had abandoned them when they needed her most, that now he had a family that truly loved him and didn't need someone who only showed up when it was convenient for her. Olivia had the same reaction when we told her later. It was heartbreaking to hear my 4-year-old daughter say with such firmness that her mother was no longer part of her life, but I also felt proud that she had the clarity and strength to set those boundaries. Rebecca didn't accept the answer. She started calling me every day, sometimes several times a day. When I blocked her number, she created new numbers. She sent me long text messages explaining how things hadn't worked out with the guy she'd left with, how she'd been thinking about us all this time, how she deserved a second chance. She also started sending messages to Victoria somehow. She'd gotten her number God knows how, telling her she was a homewrecker, that she'd gotten into a marriage that didn't belong to her, that her children hated her for taking their mother away from them. Victoria handled everything incredibly well, blocked Rebecca immediately, and showed me the messages so I'd be aware. But I saw it affected her, even though she tried not to show it. What really made me angry was when Rebecca started contacting people we used to know. Our old neighbors, some mutual friends who still lived in our old city, telling them a completely distorted version of the story. She told them I'd thrown her out of the house for no reason, that I'd taken her children away, that I'd remarried to replace her and erase her from our family's life. Some of those acquaintances contacted me to ask what was going on, and I had to explain the truth to them, show them proof in some cases that she had voluntarily abandoned us. It was humiliating having to justify and defend myself from such ridiculous accusations, but I did it because I wasn't going to let Rebecca rewrite history as if she were the victim. After like a month of this constant harassment, I called my lawyer. I explained the situation, and he recommended I file for a restraining order. I didn't want to get to that point, honestly, because part of me still felt some pity for Rebecca, like clearly something was wrong with her emotionally to be acting like this. But I also had to protect my family. We started the legal process. I documented all the calls, messages, and harassment. The judge approved a temporary restraining order pretty quickly, considering all the evidence we presented, which meant Rebecca couldn't contact us directly or come near us. I thought that would end everything, that Rebecca would finally get the message and leave us alone. But no, because Rebecca has a special talent for surprising me with her ability to do increasingly irrational things. Like 2 weeks after she was served with the restraining order, I had a dinner with my boss and some important clients. It was at a pretty fancy restaurant in the city, one of those meetings that are crucial for maintaining good relationships with clients. I arrived at the restaurant, sat down with my boss and clients. We were ordering drinks and looking at the menu, having a pleasant professional conversation, and then Rebecca showed up. I don't know how she knew where I was going to be. Maybe she'd been following me or monitoring my calendar somehow. I don't know, but there she was, walking directly toward our table with that determination I knew very well. My boss looked at me confused. The clients looked uncomfortable, and I felt my stomach sink because I knew this was going to be a disaster. Rebecca started talking, loudly, in the middle of the restaurant, about how I was a terrible husband, how I'd destroyed our family, how I'd married another woman while she was still in love with me, basically causing a monumental scene in front of my boss and clients. People at other tables were staring at us. The restaurant staff didn't know what to do, and I was sitting there trying to stay calm, while my ex-wife had a complete breakdown in public. I stood up from the table, apologized to my boss and clients, and tried to get Rebecca out of the restaurant. She resisted, kept yelling, said she wasn't leaving until I agreed to talk to her like an adult. I called the police because technically she was violating the restraining order, and when they arrived like 10 minutes later, they took her away. It was absolutely humiliating, the worst professional experience of my life without a doubt. I went back to the table, tried to apologize, and vaguely explain that it was a complicated personal situation with my ex, and although my boss was understanding, I saw the discomfort on everyone's face. We eventually lost those clients, and although my boss never said it directly, I know that incident didn't help my professional reputation at all. Rebecca spent a night in jail for violating the restraining order, and after that, finally, the calls and messages stopped. I don't know if it was because she got scared of the legal consequences or because she finally understood she wasn't going to accomplish anything, but she stopped contacting us. I heard through the grapevine, through a mutual friend who still kept in touch with her, that Rebecca had moved to another city and was trying to remake her life again. Her words, not mine. I didn't care much. Honestly, I just cared that she left us alone. It's been like 6 months since all that drama. Nathan started college this semester. He's studying engineering, and watching him leave was hard but also incredibly exciting because I know he has a bright future ahead. Olivia is in her 2nd year of high school, has good grades, a group of close friends, and even started playing guitar. Victoria and I keep building our life together, working, supporting each other, enjoying simple moments, like watching movies on the couch on Friday nights or cooking together on Sundays. The restraining order is still in effect, although Rebecca hasn't tried to contact us since that incident at the restaurant. Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if Rebecca had never left, if she'd been satisfied with the life we had. But then I realize we probably would have been miserable. Her always wanting more, me working myself to exhaustion trying to give her something that was never going to be enough. What I have now, with Victoria, with my kids, is something we built from scratch after everything fell apart. And there's something genuine and solid in that. It's not perfect. There are still difficult days. Last week, Olivia asked me if I thought her mom was ever going to change, if someday she was going to understand the damage she caused. I told her the truth, that I didn't know. that people sometimes change and sometimes don't, but that what was important was that we were fine regardless of what Rebecca did or didn't do. She thought about it for a moment and then told me, "It's okay, Dad. I have Victoria now anyway. She's more of a mom to me than Rebecca ever was." She hugged me and went to her room to do homework, and I stayed there with Victoria in the kitchen, both of us not saying anything but understanding perfectly that, despite all the chaos, the pain, the impossible moments, we'd arrived at a place where our family, this family we built piece by piece, was complete, and that's enough for me.